This week on Straight Talking Cyber, it's bad news for Facebook as the app tracking transparency nightmare appears to have come true. In other news, we look at how you can stop Apple and Google following you every single place that you go and storing all of that information. And Face ID, face recognition, biometric authentication, is it always a security thing?
App tracking transparency has been out for quite a while now. We didn't really know what the results were going to be like, but according to a Bloomberg story, only 25% of users are opting in to being tracked by companies such as Facebook. So this figure is a bit more realistic than we expected, isn't it? I mean, we were seeing like 90% opt out, but 25% sounds about right.
And there was definitely some optimism from Facebook and others when it was announced. They thought that they'd be able to manage the message. But then my kids still believe in the tooth fairy. And I think we all took a view that nobody's really going to want to opt into being tracked. And I guess it hasn't helped that Apple's been pushing its ads out to basically reinforce the point. I mean, when Facebook saw the privacy ad and that guy being followed around by all those people looking at his phone, it must have been a nightmare for them.
Yeah, those ads are absolutely brilliant, aren't they? And what I find quite funny is I think a lot of people didn't understand initially what those ads were about. I think there's been quite a few Google searches from my research for Pal About, which is actually the app that's mentioned in Apple's advert. I think people are more thinking, oh, there's a new app called Pal About, and this must be tracking me or working out who's tracking me. So I'm not sure if that message got a bit skewed. But in the end, people are realizing now this is what's happening. We're getting the messages coming up, which weren't initially coming up at first. Apps needed to update their actual app before a lot of the tracking messages were coming up. I mean, I've only got the first one from Barclays today. I set my iPad to get these messages to see, if I'd be getting them. And my Barclays app wanted to track me across other apps and websites, which is insane, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've got Google backtracking on Flock at the moment, so that looks like it's dead in the water for another year or two at least. We've got the Apple's transparency stuff really taking off with everybody. This is hitting advertisers hard. So is this now the new normal? And if it is, what are advertisers going to do about it?
That's exactly it. Are advertisers going to find new ways of tracking people, or are they going to completely change the model to do something that is non-privacy infringing? And that's what's going to be very, very interesting going forward, because Google introduced Flock, which we've talked about on this show before, which is meant to increase privacy for advertisers, so Google says, for users, but it doesn't. And there's been a big uproar. So what is there that can replace this tracking that's still going to give advertisers the metrics it needs? One of the things that was quite interesting about the Bloomberg story was that advertisers aren't getting the metrics that they once were about how well their campaigns are working. And that was one of the very important metrics that was given to them by the identifier for advertisers, which was how people were tracked across apps on their iPhone and across websites when they were browsing. So how can they replace this, yet advertising be effective? I mean, for us as people who are security and privacy professionals, we want privacy. But at the end of the day, there is a revenue model that needs to be changed. I mean, how's that going to happen? It will be very interesting to see.
And it's interesting, we talk about, David talked about Google and Flock, and we're talking about advertisers and data. One of the things I'm looking at this week is the latest innovation from Google is looking at what they call insights on your timeline. So your timeline is basically, imagine Google wearing a cap and a mask and following you around everywhere you go and making scrupulous notes of everywhere you go, how long it took you to get there, where you shopped, what you ate, did you enjoy your sandwich and all the rest of it. That in essence is what your timeline is. And this is being tracked where you have kind of location settings enabled on your Google account, you're using Google Maps, but it can clearly pull data from lots of different sources. And now what Google is offering is insight. So you can actually start to see a record of, you can go back a year and you can see what you were doing, and it's all very nice. Which restaurant did you go to? But clearly, as we all know, this is big data. And behind the scenes, this is just a dream for marketers to be able to flog you more stuff, right?
But this isn't really any different to Apple's significant location stuff, is it? I mean, we're talking about tracking where you've been. Yes, it's helping them, but it's also helping the user. We all like this idea that we can just jump straight back into these significant locations.
Yeah, I've said before, I think people should switch it off. This is, say, password or a biometrically protected part of your iPhone. It's quite hidden away. You need to go looking for it. And it does the same as Google's doing, but it stores everywhere you've gone. It uses AI to try and infer, where what your home is, where your office might be, and what are the important locations for you. And the idea is that it can then help you in terms of how long it's going to take to get there and what you do when you get there. So I wrote before about, and it is different to Google, and Apple says it's only for you. They're not using it for advertising, which is clearly different to timeline, but it's still data that you don't want to be collected. Jay Moore is a kind of a friend of STC, he's an ex-copper, talked about using people's significant locations on iPhones when they arrested people to find out where they were and when. But it comes down to who do you trust, doesn't it? And whether you trust these kind of big tech to keep this data on you.
My question is, why would anybody want to use any of these features? Why would you want to collect all your data detailing your location? To me, there is absolutely no reason whatsoever for this. It's
interesting. I wrote the last article, and I got a bit of criticism in a couple of other outlets. And for example, Apple says that significant locations is used to optimize battery charging, which for me is like using a bulldozer to take the top off your car because you've left something in the glove box. It's like, it's great. It'd be cool if my battery lasted an extra hour, but you're going to follow me around everywhere in order to make that. No, that doesn't make any sense at all.
What are you suggesting that ordinary users should do?
I think that this is down to your personal preferences, but from a privacy perspective, whilst it's cute to look at where you were on this day last year and which restaurant you went to, if you give technology companies the ability, permission to track and store everywhere you go and how long it took to get there and who you're with and all the rest of it, then more fool you in my view. I think these things should be switched off. I agree with Kate. Why on earth would you want any technology device or company tracking you like an intel agency?
Talking about intelligence agencies or intelligence, which is one of these things. This is this intelligence? Is this being stupid? But I've been looking at the latest Patch Tuesday, which has now been and gone for Microsoft users. A stonking 116 vulnerabilities fixed, 12 of those rated as critical, 2 already being exploited in the wild. Perhaps the most obvious, highest visibility of these is the print nightmare vulnerability that I've written about, which allowed a remote code execution exploit using the Windows printer spooler service, which has now been fixed. But also catching my attention, and it seems a lot of the media, was a vulnerability in Windows Hello, the facial recognition passwordless authentication system.
So what exactly is the vulnerability? How serious is it? And who does it affect? Like, is it, if I'm a Windows user, is it dangerous?
Well, it sounds pretty scary. I'll give you that. It potentially gives an attacker high-level access to a system without needing something like a 3D printed mask or a wax head or some other fantastical fakery. So let's look at how this works. Windows Hello requires a camera, and Zach knows all about this. Windows Hello requires a camera supporting both RGB and infrared sensors. Now, researchers found that only the latter, the infrared sensors, were actually processed during authentication. And they proved this by using an RGB image of SpongeBob and a single IR frame of the actual user. Now, you might have spotted the spanner in the threat actor works here, which is they need that IR image, the infrared image, for this to be exploited. Now, sure, that could be got by employing an infrared camera in an elevator, for example, or in an office, or taken by somebody walking past you. But that seems to me a bit far-fetched for the average user risk profile.
I think if you dismiss this, particularly for the reasons you're saying, Davey, at the same time, we know that the popularity of biometric access control it's going to throw up all kinds of vulnerabilities and use cases against it. And obviously with anything like that, you think about the sophisticated attacker who would take the time and effort to use this. I suspect, obviously this is something I look at in my other world. I think the whole anti-spoofing and liveness testing and the rest of it, and how you can understand when you're looking at videos or you're looking at still images and what you can do to try and understand the environment, all that will get better. But I think it's a timely reminder that Face ID or biometric authentication on your PC or anywhere else, it is not foolproof. There clearly are potential vulnerabilities, and you should have that in the back of your mind.
Absolutely. And on this particular vulnerability, Microsoft have said that if your camera hardware and the hardware drivers support enhanced signing security, it doesn't work anyway. So you can check for this in the Windows Security app under device security, and it will show if you've got enhanced signing security switched on. And I would assume that anybody that would be a likely target for a nation state operator would already have that type of equipment anyway. So that again negates this exploit for me. And anyway, apply the Patch Tuesday update, and it's fixed now. It's gone. It doesn't matter.